So this evening, Books and Books is very happy to welcome back Ms. Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. Presenting her new book, Before We Visit the Goddess. Ms. Divakaruni is the author of 16 books, including Oleander Girl, The Mistress of Spices, Sister of My Heart, Palace of Illusions, and One Amazing Thing. Her work has appeared in The New Yorker, The Atlantic Monthly, and The New York Times, amongst other places. And she has won an American Book Award, among other prizes. She is currently the McDavid Professor of Creative Writing at the University of Houston. In this book, she brings us the story of 3 generations of mothers and daughters who must discover their greatest source of strength in one another. Before We Visit the Goddess is a masterful, brilliant tale of a family both united and torn apart by ambition and love. Here to tell us more about it, please give a very warm welcome to Ms. Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And thanks to Books and Books for having me here again. It is always a pleasure to read in this lovely bookstore. And thank you all for being here, everyone in this audience, especially my students from Bona. And hello to everyone who is watching this live streamed. It is a great pleasure for me to talk about this book. I've been working on this book for a while, and it is in some ways very different from any of my other books. The first of all, I started writing this book after my own mother passed away a few years back. And so this book is an exploration of motherhood and daughterhood and heritage. I myself have 2 children who are growing up in this country, so I've been concerned about heritage for a long time, but particularly more and more as they grow older in America. And I think as I was writing this book, I realized that heritage it's a complicated thing. We would like to believe that we are always passing on wonderful, positive things to our children, but I fear that that is not always so. And possibly our children will be quick to point that out to us. So in this book, it is 3 generations of mothers and daughters: the grandmother Shabitri, the daughter Bella, and her daughter Tara. And they have very different lives, not only because they belong to 3 generations, but because they belong to 3 different places. Shabitri's life begins and continues in India. Bella is the immigrant who moves over to America, and Tara is the granddaughter the Indian-American granddaughter who has never been to India, although India, I think, has an important effect on her and is part of her mental landscape. So this book is also different from my other books because none of my books of fiction are autobiographical per se, but this book follows my own geographical trajectory, beginning in Bengal, in a little village very much like my grandparents' village, and moving to Kolkata, the city of Kolkata, and then to California, and then to Houston, where I now live. This is also my first book that has a lot of Texas in it, but I think you will find, and this was my intention, that a lot of times when you say the word Texas, a certain image comes into the minds of people, and this book is about a very different kind of Texas. So I hope that you will enjoy all of those things. With each novel, I also like to set myself a challenge in terms of the art of writing the novel. And so this one has a very different form that I've never used before, but that I loved working with. It is a novel in stories. So there are 9 stories in this book. Each one can kind of stand by itself, but together they give us the arc of these 3 lives. Also, in this book, I did not follow a chronological order because I wanted to look at memory and emotional time. how we remember our lives. And if you think of our experience of thinking back on our lives, we don't think about, well, this happened first and then this and then this and then this, right? Our mind will flit from emotionally resonant memories to other emotionally resonant memories. And that's what happens over here. There are many tellers in the stories, not just the women, but the men who are important in their lives, who love them, who support them, and yes, who sometimes betray them. Okay. So I thought I would start by reading to you a little bit from Savitri's story, the very first story. So Savitri is of my mother's generation. She grew up in a newly independent India. And it was an India where even at that time, if you did not come from a rich family as a woman, it was not easy for you. It was not easy for you to get an education. Savitri is very bright. She loves school. She's finished school in her little village. And she just longs to go to college because she feels that that is her escape. But the family has no money, so her mother, who is otherwise a very proud woman, kind of begs one of the richer women in the house, in the village, who has a home in Kolkata, to let Savitri stay there. And the woman says, okay, she can stay in my house and go to college. And she goes to a women's college, but she has to take her science and math classes in the men's college. So she would go there with all the other women and then come back. So that's Savitri's situation right now. Savitri is at first very unhappy and homesick in Kolkata because this rich family does not treat her well. Even the servants of this rich family don't treat her well because they're like, who is this usurper? Who is this nobody who comes and who stays here and who eats for free? So she's having a hard time. And to escape from this oppressive situation, she goes to the terrace of this house. And I love houses. Houses often, if you've read my other books, you'll find that houses play a big part. And I particularly love the old Kolkata mansions, which are now, they're passing out of history. They're falling apart. But all of this is taking place in one of those old Kolkata mansions where you have big terraces upstairs. And usually you have a little a spiral staircase, a metal spiral staircase. And so she goes up the metal spiral staircase to the terrace where she can be alone and she can look at the sky, which she misses because she's a village girl. And she just, she writes imaginary letters to her mother, which she can't really send because her mother doesn't know how to read. Well, one day when she's over there, she meets a young man, and this is the son of the household, the only son of the household, the apple of his mother's eye, you can say, and they begin to become really good friends, and then they begin to fall in love, and no one in the house knows this because they meet in secret. And right around this time, things seem to begin to go really well with Savitri because Savitri has a talent. Her talent is she's a wonderful sweet maker, something she's learned from her mother. And those of you who are familiar with Bengal, you know that Bengal is famed for its sweets. And Savitri is one of the best sweet makers. So the lady of the house begins to become very fond of Savitri because now whenever she has guests, Savitri makes the sweets and then she gets, lots of admiration from her guests. So Leela Moi, the hostess, is becoming very indulgent towards Savitri and she's giving Savitri gifts. She gives her 2 beautiful saris. And Savitri is like, well, maybe something is going to work out, between Leela Moi's son and me. All right, so I'm going to read to you from this part, the next portion. Summer had descended upon Kolkata with epic vengeance. Just think Miami times 2. On hot days, it's Miami, period. On hot Miami days. Okay. Summer had descended upon Kolkata with epic vengeance. Savitri came back from college, bedraggled with sweat, craving a bath, cold water cascading over her body in the maid's bathroom. But a servant was waiting. Leela wanted to see her. Sabitri was surprised. There were no card games today, or had she made a mistake? Because now they play cards together. They're getting really pally. But there were no card games today, or had she made a mistake? Let me drink some water, she said. Change my sari. The woman scrunched up her face and shook her head. Ranima's waiting. Better come right now. The first thing she saw when she entered the room was the red quilt from the terrace that Rajiv and she used to lie on, crumpled on the floor like the pelt of a dead animal. The blood rushed to her head and then away. She had to hold on to the doorframe. When her vision cleared, she looked around for Rajiv, who would surely defend her. But there was only Leela, and behind her, Paro, her special maid, hands on her hips, swollen with satisfaction. From across the years, Sabitri remembers Leela's contorted mouth, spitting out invectives. Conniving slut, harlot's daughter, poisonous snake in my bosom. Her own mouth was frozen, so that when she tried to say she had done nothing wrong, the words would not obey. She learned that Rajiv had been sent away already to his uncle's home in another city. He would continue his studies there. As for Sabitri, she was to leave the house right now. No, Leela didn't care where she went or what happened to her. Sabitri stood at the tram stop for a long while in the oppressive dusk, carrying her small painted trunk. Finally, she boarded a tram that would take her to the men's college. She could think of no other place. She opened her handbag, so light, and looked down at the frighteningly few rupee notes in there. Her trunk was light too. Paro had followed her to her room and rummaged through it. Let's see what you're stealing, and taken the silk saris Leela had given her. She'd taken some of Sabitri's own things as well. A buffalo horn comb that her mother had given. A tiny bottle of rose water Sabitri had saved up for months to buy. Sabitri had been too heartsick to protest. The men's college loomed eerily in the gloom. She slipped through the gate, thankful that the gateman wasn't there to stop her, and ran up the stairs. On the second story, at the end of a corridor, there was a small room with a plaque on it. Women's Common Room. She'd gone there once exploring with her friends. It was piled with dusty furniture and smelled of mice droppings. But there was a bolt on the inside and a small toilet. She could stay there for the night. Tomorrow? She couldn't handle the thought of tomorrow yet. When she reached it, the door to the common room was padlocked. The strength went out of her and she slid to the floor, unable to hold in her sobs any longer. Terror and rage, but foremost was the fear of what might happen to her tonight when the night watchman came by. Would he throw her out on the street? Would he do worse? Beneath it all roiled the humiliation. What would her parents, her relatives, her village say if they knew she had been kicked out of the Mitir home like a dog? No one would care that the love she and Rajiv had felt for each other was pure and beautiful. She had been weeping too hard to hear the footsteps. When she felt a hand on her shoulder, she flinched and cried out, throwing up her arms to protect herself. And I'm going to end this section wickedly right here. But we're going to move on now. We're going to move across the years, across 2 generations, and now we're in Houston, and now we're in Tara's life. Tara is just about the same age as Sabitri. Bad things have been happening to Tara, which I won't go into. But as a result of these, she's estranged from her family. She's estranged from her Indian American community. She's dropped out of school. She's got a part-time job in a thrift store. And and she has begun a relationship. She's begun a relationship with this man, Robert. And here she's going to think to herself about why she loves Robert so much. And she has to think about this because there are some problems in their relationship. We'll get into that in a minute. I just wanted to say, feel free to laugh. I think of this as kind of a dark funny, okay, not light funny, but dark funny part of the book. And I want to say this because sometimes when people come to literary readings, they're like, this is a literary reading. We must be very serious, but feel free to laugh. Okay. So she's telling herself why she loves Robert. I should preface this with a little story, which is that ever since this book came out, and this book is the first of my books that came out simultaneously in India and here, and I'm very happy and honored and just grateful that it's been on the bestseller list in India, the national bestseller list, ever since it came out, like from the first week. So for a long time it was number one, so I was like, really? Me? Anyway. So, but I've been getting a lot of interviews from Indian journalists, and one of them went like this. There is a lot of sex in this book. I'm like, yes. So anyway, I'm like, yes. The journalist says, much of it is between unmarried people. I mean, the next question, why is that? I'm like, it happens. Anyway, don't get too excited because my wonderful husband, who is here today and who's a great supporter of my writing, often tells me that he is very disappointed because all the sex in my book just about is in the white spaces between sections. Anyway, I love Robert's hands. I've loved them ever since he ran them over my naked back at our very first meeting. This is not as risque as it sounds. I was at Body Work for the weekday half-hour special, which my best friend Blanca had bought me as a birthday gift. He gave me a full hour and then invited me to dinner. Over souvlaki and ouzo, we discovered that we shared a passion for sci-fi movies. A month later, he asked if I would move in with him. I knew it was too soon. Plus, I'd never lived with a man. Yes, I said. Oh, yes. But as you might imagine, there is now trouble brewing in paradise, and this is the reason. They had a fight. Okay. The reason for my fight with Robert is a stuffed raccoon. He won it from Victor, his best buddy, the result of a pool-playing bet involving something called a bank shot with throw, the intricacies of which I failed to grasp, and installed it on our chest of drawers 2 weeks back. Apparently, the raccoon is valuable. More important, Victor had shot and stuffed it himself, and he was terribly cut up at having to part with it. He offered to buy it back from Robert for $200. And you refused? I eyed the creature with disbelief. Its upper lip was lifted in a snarl, and one front leg was shorter than the other, though that could have been the result of Victor's taxidermy. It appeared ready to spring off the chest of drawers and launch itself upon us. But naturally, said the love of my life, you should have seen Victor's face. He ran his hand over the raccoon's back. Feel the fur. It's incredible. Soft and bristly at the same time. I declined. The only thing I found incredible was that he expected me to sleep in the same room with this monstrosity. Want a shower? Robert offered as a peace gift. I considered sulking, but I love showering with Robert, his fingers unbuttoning my clothes, letting them drop where they will, the way he holds me as he soaps my back, as though I were a child who might slip and fall. White space. But afterward, I couldn't sleep. I became aware of a musky odor. The raccoon? Surely it couldn't smell, except of whatever embalmment Victor had used. Was it the scent of another woman? I couldn't stop myself from imagining Robert at work, his hands caressing female curves. What did he say to them? What made him the most popular massage therapist at Bodywork? In the morning, I asked Robert to move the raccoon to the living room. He refused. I claimed he was inconsiderate. He accused me of not caring about what was important to him. I took to covering the raccoon with a pillowcase when Robert was out of the house. He took to checking on it first thing when he returned. Without a word, he'd ball up the pillowcase and throw it with vicious accuracy into our dirty laundry basket. I'd rescue it surreptitiously so I could use it again. It was like a vaudeville show, except not funny. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, and things are going to devolve rapidly in this relationship. And I want to point out that over here are my wonderful students who I'm teaching at VONA, the Voices of the Nations workshop, the intensive residency here at the University of Miami. And just as I've been telling them this, and now you can see it, guys, in my work as well. In fiction, I think in good fiction, bad things have to happen to good people. So yes, some bad things will happen, not all bad. But yes, that raccoon will become very important. Questions? A few easy questions from the audience.
Well, you have a question, get to you with the microphone so that the internet audience can hear what
Yes.
you're saying. Here you go.
Praise is also acceptable. Yes.
My name is Lata, and I was born in Kolkata. From the time that you are describing when Savitri was there, why didn't she go to the women's college? Why did she go to men's college when she was kicked out?
Yeah, it's because the men's college had a women's common room, whereas the women's college didn't need a common room for women, right? But the men's college, and this is true of Presidency where I went to college, which used to be a men's college. So it was felt that the women needed like a little special place where they could retreat and just be themselves. That's why that college has the women's college.
I went to
common room.
Shikshayatan,
Right,
the women's college.
right.
Hi, Chitra. So I saw this book as a very mystical creation, especially with the magician that Bella befriended. And, you know, the quote you have had in the book several times, granddaughters are fortunate lamps brightening the family's name. Wicked daughters are firebrands blackening the family's fame. So I saw like the majority of the book as almost a projection by the magician onto Bella, showing that what her life would be like if she chose to live it, as opposed to trading her life for her brother's. And in the end, you know, I feel like, you know, when she saw all the pain and destruction that she caused in all the lives of the people she touched, you know, the mother, the daughter, she chose to actually do the opposite and actually trade her life for her brother's. And there's, you know, little factoids in the book, like, you know, showing how the reality in your book is a projection, not actually what happened. Because things like Facebook's is off, the Facebook years are off by 7 years in your book, and other little things like that show that I think there's little things that show that it's a projection of an alternate reality.
That's a very interesting interpretation. Thank you. And you guys are from a book club, right? The Network of Indian Professionals Book Club. Thank you for reading so clearly and so closely. And yes, you know, this book does have a mystical dimension, although I hadn't interpreted it quite as you have, but I think that's certainly possible in the text.
Because, you know, she's the, you know, it's a Brahmin family, you know, it's like, you know, with karma is supposed to be able to heal or affect your family several generations in the future and in the past. And it seems like the magician was giving her that opportunity, and she took it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. And Proverbs, as you pointed out, are a big part of this book. So this proverb, what fortunate women are, fortunate girls, they brighten the entire family's name. And what good girls brighten the family's name, bad girls, they are like a smirch on the family. So, you know, it's just, those are proverbs that I too grew up with. And there will be proverbs from different places all through the book. And there is definitely a mystical dimension which relates to the title, which is Before We Visit the Goddess. And that is actually the title of a story. And that is a story that comes kind of in the middle of the book, where Tara, who is at this point completely irreligious, is going to go to a temple, an actual temple in Houston, the temple of the goddess Meenakshi, and she will have a transformative and kind of mystical experience over there. And there's another meaning to this title, which is that I feel that the visiting the goddess is something that, you know, being in touch with the inner divine is something that all of us are moving towards in our experience, in our life. And certain things have to happen before that experience occurs. And these things involve maybe suffering, maybe learning compassion, maybe learning forgiveness towards others and also towards ourselves.
Who else? Let me give him over here.
Yes. I see a friend. I would like to say, well, actually, I should brag, right? Here's someone who's come all the way from Houston to be here. And while we're bragging, I should brag about my husband, who's always very wonderfully supportive. And here are people who've come from India. Someone's come from India to be here, and from Canada, and from Los Angeles. I feel very blessed. Thank you all for being here.
Hi, my name is Susie. I work for the University of Miami too, but in pediatrics. I wanted to ask you, there was a part in the book, or mostly every part, where she's making the pastry and the desserts, and she takes such pride and such passion, and she pours, like you said at the beginning, her whole culture into it to create something so different for the community. Do you feel that way when you're writing a book? Does it become that special for you, where you have to put all your passion, everything into it to create something different every time?
You know, that is a wonderful analogy. I think that's just beautiful. Yes, I feel that way. I feel that, you know, the best of myself goes into my books. And with each book, I make a very special effort to put, you know, whatever I have understood of my life and my culture and being an immigrant and being a woman and all of those complicated things. And, you know, what I understand changes from book to book as I'm going through life. And actually, that's what happens to these women. One of the other major questions that I was concerned with for many, many years, and this came out of my childhood, where my mother was, for many years while we were growing up, she was a single parent, and she struggled very hard to bring us up. And she would always say to me, as she was struggling, that I want you to be a successful woman and not go through this kind of trouble. And so the question of what does it mean to be a successful woman is very important in this book. And each of the generations of women have to ask themselves, and the answer is often different. And as I was writing it, I realized that the answer for that is different in my life too, depending on different times in my life. So yes, I think I go very deep to think about life, and I try to pour it the best I can into the books. Oh, the sweets, yes. Bengal is famous for its sweets. Bengali women are famous for making them, but I am not a good cook. I am like the granddaughter, Tara. That's the mother, the Shabitri, the grandmother, is a wonderful cook. She cooks traditional. Bela, the daughter, is a wonderful cook. She's very creative. She cooks fusion. And Tara, her motto is 20 minutes from cutting board to table. And that's me. Although I do like creating these easy recipes or these easy kind of takes on traditional recipes. And I have a blog called Amazing Things, and there are some easy recipes there.
I'm interested in your writing process and interested in the form of linked short stories that tell a larger story. And I was wondering, I'm assuming you probably didn't write them in the order in which they appear. What was your writing process in this book?
You know, that's a great question. And this is the first time I'm writing these linked stories, so I was learning as I went along. And actually, I read a lot of linked story collections as I was writing them, these stories. And I had decided early on that they wouldn't be chronological. So I wrote several of them in the order in which they appear, but some of them, I wrote them, and I wasn't sure where I would put them until I saw everything. And then having seen everything, I could see where they best fitted in, where was the emotional resonance, where were those connections. So towards the end, I was really like trying them in different order and figuring out which one would be. And I was imagining the reader's experience as they go through the book, which ones would be the most powerful. Now, I knew which one was going to be the first story and which one was going to be the last story, and there are some unusual connections, I hope unusual, and I hope surprising between them. And I knew that much. But in between, I really had to try it out. So I think often for me, writing is a process of experimentation, and I love that. I think that helps me grow, that helps me keep it spontaneous. So, and as I was telling my students this week, it's great to have an outline, but we always have the option of deviating from it if we come up with something better.
So did you think about the whole story? Did you think about the whole story once and then inserted them as the relevance may have gone, or for curiosity's sake?
Well, I knew that this was going to be the lives of these three generations of women. I didn't know everything that would happen to them. I knew the beginning, the situation in the beginning, the problem in the beginning. I wasn't completely sure how that problem would play itself out over the three generations and how it would be at the end. I had to discover that as I wrote. Yes.
In your last 300 readings, I never asked you a question, but so
I understand now that you're being live streamed all over the U.S.
that's precisely the reason I thought I would ask you. When are you going to start sleeping before 1 or 3 o'clock in the morning?
You can't like give away our bedroom secrets. But he's pointing to the fact that I'm a late night writer. I write well at night when everybody goes to sleep. And then, I'm very crotchety in the morning. That's the part he didn't tell you.
He beat me to the question.
I'm trying.
You beat me to the question. Question over here.
Oh, okay, let me see how I can frame that. I haven't thought it out myself. When you write, you just write the first draft the way it comes out. Do you rewrite them? And when you rewrite them, what are you looking for and how, in order to make it better? The other question is, Indians are, all of us think we are all very smart and we know our culture very well and we are very critical about everything, especially the Bengalis. And so me being a Bengali as well, I know how it is. Everyone has 20 opinions. So when you write, how has it been, the reaction from the Bengali community, the regular Indians, and the world at large?
I love how she says the regular Indians. Okay, so the first thing is I am just an inveterate reviser. I'm an obsessive reviser. I revise all the time. I take like maybe 6 months after the book is finished just to keep revising it, putting it away, revising it. And I'll share a secret with you. I guess it's not very secret because now it's going to be on live stream. Even as I was reading this book, I was giving you the new improved version. Because, you can polish, you see the book and you know more things. Anyway, the response for this book has been particularly wonderful because, as I told you, it's been #1 on the national bestseller list. It continues now at #2 on the national bestseller list, and I'm very happy because one never knows. One never knows. You write the best book you can. You don't know if anybody will, if it'll touch anyone. But this has evolved when my very first book, Arranged Marriage, which was about immigrant life, came out. There was a lot of hue and cry in the community, Bengali and otherwise. They were like, she's giving away our secrets. Now what will people think about us? But I think they got over it because I think it's really important to, have portraits of one's own community in literature. It's important to see ourselves reflected seriously in literature, and there will be positives and there will be negatives. And I think, literature, the aim of good literature is to show that we are complex beings living complex lives in a complex world. And that's certainly my hope and my intention. Writers, as far as I think of it, are not cultural ambassadors. They are, I hope, truth tellers. And that's what I try to do.
When this book came out, I was expecting actually the 3rd installment of your Sister of My Heart series, because the last time I asked you about it, you said that the characters weren't done with you. So can I expect it next time?
Well, as some of you might know, I wrote Sister of My Heart about 2 cousins growing up in Kolkata. And that is a story of deep friendship between 2 women whose lives change. One moves halfway across the world. So it's an examination of how and whether friendship can continue under difficult circumstances. I thought I was done with that book, but really those characters wouldn't leave me alone. So I went on and wrote Vine of Desire, which is about the next part of their lives. And then, yes, they do come up from time to time, but I've been pushing them. I'm like, hush, I have other books to write, other characters. But a book that is very much in the works that I've almost finished all of the research for is going to be a book on the Ramayana, our major epic, the Ramayana, from Sita's point of view. And I'm thinking of that as a companion volume to my book, Palace of Illusions, which, as some of you know, is the retelling of our other epic, the Mahabharata, from a major woman character, Draupadi's point of view. And it's very important for me to retell these wonderful, ancient, epic stories that remain very powerful and meaningful today, to retell them with a woman at its center. And so I wanted to share with you something exciting about Palace of Illusions. It's being made into a movie. Thank you. And the wonderful independent director, Aparna Sen, who some of you might know from her movie Mr. and Mrs. Iyer, she is the director for this. So I'm very excited. And So please send your positive energies to Kolkata, where this movie is, forming. It's being formulated.
Who else has a question or comment right here?
I have a question about the men in this book. So they appear, but it seems very women driven, which is amazing because we're at a point where we can read books that are about women. But the men just seem accidental as opposed to. So, could you talk a little more about the men and the roles they play in the book?
Sure. I think the women are certainly at the center of this book because this is a book about women and the lineage of women and the kind of influences that women pass on to their daughters. And that's a very particular relationship. It's different from the relationship between fathers and daughters or mothers and sons. And I wanted to explore that. So the women definitely have to be at the center of the books. And okay, disclaimer or confession, the women are at the center of most of my books. What can I say? We're just so interesting. But now don't get me into trouble here.
Sorry. Yeah,
So-
I think you didn't mean accidental, you meant incidental.
But the men in this book are actually very important because they have important effects on the women's lives, right? Good and bad. In fact, there are moments when the women are in great danger, like sometimes emotional, sometimes psychological danger, or they're in a very difficult place. And they cannot turn to each other, which is also true in mother-daughter relationships. It's a very intense relationship, but it's also a thorny one sometimes. And so sometimes the men come in and do the things that family can't, blood family can't do for you. So this book is also about how strangers sometimes save us and how sometimes the most amazing relationships are with these strangers who enter our lives and then exit. That certainly happened to me at different times, where strangers will come and it's almost like they're sent into our lives. They do something for us and then they exit it. So I think sometimes men are playing that magical role, and the magician that you talked about is certainly one of those characters. He comes, he transforms everything, and then he's gone.
Was he a magician?
I'm not explaining. I'm going to let you figure that one out. And that is an open-ended story. We were discussing in our workshop open-ended stories, and I have to tell you this. So my earlier book, One Amazing Thing, if any of you have read this, it's a story about a group of people who are trapped in an earthquake in the basement of a high-rise building, and all through it's like, what's going to happen to them? Are they going to escape? Are they going to die? Many things go on. They tell each other stories that really reveal one amazing thing about their lives. And I'm not going to tell you how the book ends, but I'll just tell you what one reader wrote to me after reading the book. She wrote to me, "My book is incomplete. Please send me the last page. I think I got like a defective copy." But it's because I love open-ended stories, because those are the stories that when I read them, they make me keep wondering after the end of the book. And that's what I want for my readers.
I haven't read the Goddess book. I was just curious to see how young you were when you first thought about writing.
I came to writing much later than many people. A lot of writers I know from the time they're in grade school, they know they want to be writers, they're writing things. I did not write anything at all except for like school exercises until I came over here to this country. Years after I became an immigrant and came here was when I started writing. So I think in some ways immigration made me into a writer. It pushed me into writing because it gave me material. It gave me material and it gave me a reason to tell a story, because through writing I discovered that I could understand my life and I could make sense of parts of my life and the lives I was seeing around me, both other Indian immigrants and the mainstream community. So that's when I really began to write. So much later, I'd finished my PhD, I was already teaching.
And since your husband is present, I wanted to know, was your marriage arranged?
Well, Murthy and I like to think it was arranged in heaven.
I like to think that she arranged her marriage.
No. I hang my head in. But he's not Bengali, but he's just as good.
Chitra, we're so excited to be here as a class. I had a question. You had said that this is the first work that is autobiographical?
No,
in
it
some
just
ways?
follows an
It's
a geographical trajectory. That's the same as
geographical
mine.
trajectory.
Yes.
So I was curious, how much is it any part of it autobiographical, or did
I create everything?
Create everything?
Right. You know the characters, Shabitri, Bela, and Tara? All the things you really love about them? Just kidding. No, they're pretty much imagined. I find that imagining characters is what works best for me, because if I get too close to people's biographies, then I get stuck in the details of lives and I can't get out of them into what the story needs. So they are imagined. But, okay, another little secret here. This is not what I tell my family and friends, though. What I tell them is, you better be nice to me or else.
Is this book written in English and read in English in India?
That's a great question. Yes, right now it is written in English. It's the same book with the spelling changes that are appropriate for India. And yes, I write in English. And it's published now in English. It is being translated. Most of my books are translated. In fact, now they're translated into 29 languages, which I find, amazing beyond belief, and I'm very grateful for that. But originally all written in English, although my mother tongue is Bengali. I grew up speaking Bengali, but I was always schooled in English. And my mother, to whom I used to write letters when she was alive, said to me once, she said, "It's a good thing you don't write your books in Bengali." Absolutely. They're wonderful writers in Bengali. Evan, you know a lot about Bengali.
I was born in Calcutta.
You are an honorary Bengali. You are an official Bengali.
This is completely off the subject, but I don't know Bengali. Would you say something in Bengali so we could hear it?
Okay, and all the Bengali speakers. Okay, you will know what it means. Boita keno. That means buy my book.
Thank you. Any other?
This is more fun.
Thank you, Chitra. And
I think Mitch should say something. Come on, Mitch.
My Bengali just isn't working tonight. But I just want to say, as someone who's been here through probably most of the books that you've written, I find it such an honor to have you reading with us tonight. And I want to thank you for just such a wonderful talk.
Thank you for having me in this wonderful
I also want to
bookstore.
welcome Vona. Miami. It's hard to believe that it's been a Vona happened last summer, but we think it's just a remarkable thing. And I know that there are other readings coming up throughout the week, so I hope you'll come to all of them as well. And I thank you all for coming, and Chitra, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mitch.
You know, Chitra, you say that you're not a very good cook, but as long as you keep writing these wonderful books, I give you.
Thank you.
Folks, a note to our internet audience watching at home, there's still plenty of time for you to call the number on your screen, and we can ship Before We Visit the Goddess to wherever you are in the U.S. free of charge. For those of you here in the house, we have the novel as well as several of Chitra's previous books for sale in the front room over there. She's going to be signing here at the table to the left of the podium, and this has been such fun and so wonderful. Please give another hand to Chitra. Thank you. Thank you, Chitra.